See, N is in Nancy or M is in Mary?
Ready? Yeah.
Customer not present? You think it's because they're sending it through to us and you're saying customer not present? Where did you read it at, on the budget or?
Denise sent it to me when I was researching the franchise ordinance.
See, they send it to us by wire every month, and that may be something to do with the customer not present because they're wiring the money to us.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get this started. We're going to start our committee meeting here, and we have with us the Rock Region Metro team. We have Becca Green, who is the Director of Public Engagement, Justin Avery, who is the Interim Chief Executive Officer, Boris Palchik, who is online. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
He is online. He is a consultant for Foursquare ITP, and Alana McKeeman, who is also online, who is with Foursquare. So at this time, Ms. Green, we will turn it over to you.
Come and visit with you tonight. I think the last time I was in front of this council was 4 years ago, so some of you may remember me, some not. My name's Becca Green. I'm the Director of Public Engagement at Rock Region Metro, and I handle marketing, communications, community outreach, and public affairs. And tonight I've been asked to walk you guys through a service overview of Metro Connect Conway microtransit service. So before we get started, I'll just let you know that I'm going to speak for about 25 minutes to 30 minutes, and I'm going to cover the service, what went into the planning of the service, how the service looks, what the vehicles look like, and what the fares are. So if you would, as a housekeeping item, if you have any questions, please maybe jot them down, because I may, in that 25 to 30 minutes, cover your question before we get to the end of the presentation. And at that point, if you have additional questions, I'm happy to stay and answer any that you have.
And I promise you, Becca can answer any question you have.
Okay, well, away we go then. And thank you, Boris and Alana, for joining us tonight too. So hello out there. I think Boris was trying to chime in there for a moment, and I think he's normalizing parenthood in the Zoom age. So he has a new baby, and he's online though and listening, and can jump in and help questions at the end as well. Okay. So first, I'd like to just remind you of the Rock Region Metro mission, which is to provide safe, reliable, convenient, and cost-effective public transit, and that is certainly what we aim to do with the Metro Connect Conway microtransit service. We are governed by a 12-member board of directors who are appointed by our primary funding partners, the City of Little Rock, the City of North Little Rock, and Pulaski County. And we have a 12-member management team. It's a skilled, highly competent, energetic, fun team. And with me tonight again is our Chief Financial Officer, Justin Avery, who is also right now our interim Chief Executive Officer as we engage in a recruitment search to replace Charles Frazier, who recently left. This is a reminder of how we got started with this project. This is a map showing the Little Rock urbanized area and the Conway urbanized area as defined by the U.S. Census. As you can see, in the green area is the Little Rock urbanized area, and you can see on the map that it surpasses the city of Little Rock. It's the entire urbanized area as defined by the U.S. Census. So it includes Little Rock, North Little Rock, Jacksonville, Sherwood, Maumelle, Cabot, Austin, Benton, and Bryant. But a couple of years ago, Conway also became an urbanized area because it surpassed 50,000 people. So thereby, the U.S. Census determined that it had its own urbanized area, making it eligible for Federal Transit Administration dollars. And a little history, in 2018, the City Council approved to enter an agreement to make Metro the designated recipient of Conway's 5307 Urbanized Area Formula Funding monies. And those funds remain with Metro, but are earmarked for Conway Transit and transit-oriented development projects and cannot be used for any other purpose. And in 2019, Metro launched our first microtransit service pilot project. So we've been operating this type of service for 2.5 years, and we've learned a lot along the way. And earlier this year, the City of Conway and Metro reached an agreement to launch microtransit service with one-time CARES Act funding. So the benefits of this are that it engages a somewhat familiar ride-hailing, ride-sharing service type, sort of similar to Uber and Lyft and other transportation network companies like them, to launch and monitor resident and visitor use of public transit in Conway. It also utilizes Metro's experience to manage highly robust and technical FTA regulation requirements. And finally, it establishes Central Arkansas's first public transit service outside of Pulaski County, thereby laying the foundation for the region's multimodal connectivity needs, which I think are very important for this community. A little bit about microtransit. It's a ride-hailing, ride-sharing, point-to-point accessible public transit service using smaller vehicles, and it's ideal for addressing areas of low or emerging public transit demand. It's also a technology-driven demand response service. So it relies, again, on a familiar interface. Anybody who's used Uber and Lyft will be familiar on how to use this service. You can book rides through the app. That's a free app that you can download from the major stores, the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store. And it also offers more coverage in the fixed route than a fixed route service. So it can go in places where it may not make sense to have a 35 or 40-foot mass transit bus going. And it's also a little bit more immediate and responsive than traditional dial-a-ride service that you may be familiar with other public transit agencies across the country. That's been a service that's been around a long, long time, so this is a little more responsive. But unlike Uber and Lyft and other transportation network companies, what microtransit offers is shared rides. So Uber actually does have a product that's similar to this. It's called Uber Pool, but most people in this market I've determined have not been exposed to Uber Pool. But Uber Pool is when you book a ride and you're kind of, let's say you're at a hotel and there's somebody else at the hotel and you don't know each other very well, but you're kind of going into the whole downtown area and you might be dropped off at different locations, but you're kind of going in the general same direction. So you can join up and save money on your ride by sharing that ride. So usually, though, that's not what people in this market are using Uber for. Usually it's just a ride by themselves. So this is how microtransit's a little bit different. So you are sharing your ride, and it's also dependent on a purpose-specific fleet. So unlike Uber or Lyft, when you don't know unless you don't know until you book your ride what kind of vehicle is picking you up. So you don't know exactly what the year, make, and model is. It's dependent on which drivers are circulating in the area. With this service, we have a dedicated fleet, and I'll show you here in a few minutes what those vehicles look like. And then finally, you have predictable fares. Anyone who's ever booked a trip on Uber or Lyft knows that the pricing can change depending on how far you're going, or maybe it's a major sport events night and everybody's trying to book a ride at the same time after the game's over, and then you experience surge pricing. This is a dependable, consistent fare that's predictable with this service. A little bit more information about, there we go. Microtransit is that it can support a variety of trips. So you can use this service to go to work, to school, to health appointments, wherever you need to go. And you can also use it to make regional connections. So there is a park and ride lot off Dave Ward Drive here. So you could use this service to maybe book a ride from your house in the morning to get over to that park and ride lot, where you then join up with a vanpool group or maybe your friend or your cousin who's going to drive you into Little Rock, let's say, to go to wherever you need to go. And it's also a good service for gap service. So let's say that eventually Conway does have fixed route bus service. This is a great service to serve those kind of gaps in between. So let's say, for example, you need to use it on the weekends because it's more economical to run microtransit service other than mass transit fixed route bus service on the weekends, because not as many people are needing to get to work maybe that day or whatever. Same with late night service. So microtransit is used in other markets to handle those kind of needs when it may not make financial sense to run the fixed route service. And it can also be used, again, we had talked about how it's great for establishing new or emerging public transit needs. So it's great to use this service to gauge demand in a new market, which is exactly what the city of Conway is. So one great thing about microtransit is technology-based. So every trip is captured within the data. So you know exactly where every trip starts and where every trip ends This is very valuable information to take forward if you ever were considering growing to, for example, a fixed route service. Then it would give you a better idea of where people are traveling the most, where they're traveling to, what are the hot corridors here in Conway, all of that great information. And finally, it can be replaced with fixed route service when and where it's appropriate. Obviously, we're already doing this in the Little Rock and North Little Rock area. We have had fixed route bus service for a very long time, since 1986, since we got started. It even precedes our time as an agency having bus route service in Little Rock and North Little Rock. But in this case, we're operating now simultaneously bus service with microtransit zones. So they're complementing each other with the two services. More specifically about the design of the Conway Connect Zone. Again, we've developed it with the help of our professional transit planning company, Foursquare ITP, with Boris and Alana, who are on this call, are working for Foursquare ITP and have done a great job helping us plan this service. And they've been using data simulations from Metro's current microtransit service provider, which is Transloc. Transloc is a subsidiary of Ford Mobility, and that's the Ford Motor Company that you know. So this is a very major brand that's behind this service, and they've done some deep dives into data simulation. They do microtransit service for a number of public transit agencies across the country at this point. So they've been using all that data to run simulations for this zone. We also worked with the Conway city staff to determine what the trip generators were in the area. A trip generator is just a fancy word for where do people want to go. So the hospitals, the library, the hot spots like Target or shopping centers here, the academic institutions, the major employers, all of that, that data was given a look-see and a review and analysis by our planning team and by the city staff here. And we also use some other data-driven resources such as traffic analysis zones and that kind of planning information that comes from Metro Plan. They take all this data in and help share it for purposes just like this. And finally, we also did look at things like where are the zero-car households within the city of Conway? Where are the senior citizen populations within Conway? And looking at those demographics that traditionally use public transit across the country in different markets. And finally, we vetted and refined this plan through here recently through a series of meetings with stakeholders from Conway, representing Conway businesses, academic institutions, healthcare places such as the hospitals and clinics, and also social service industries through a series of meetings here last month. So from a rider's perspective, the key design features of this service are that it's easy to book a ride. You see a screenshot of the app. That is the same app that we're using in Little Rock. That's the Riverdale zone that you see up on the screen there on the map, if you're familiar with the Riverdale neighborhood in Little Rock. So it's very easy to book your ride. You're getting real-time vehicle information. So once you've booked a ride, you'll get a series of push notifications, and it'll say things like your vehicle's 8 minutes away, it's 5 minutes away, it's 3 minutes away, it's pulling up, it's here. And there's also reasonable wait and travel times, and we'll review this here in a minute, but you know, depending on where you're going, it could be a very short trip, and depending on what time of day you're traveling, it could be, you could get there within a very short amount of time. It just kind of depends on the distance you're traveling and what time of day it is and who all is using it at that time. And again, it's very affordable fares because this is public transit service, so it's already heavily subsidized by the government. That's what makes it public transit instead of private. So the booking is done by this mobile app, and it's called the microtransit app, but there's also an option if you do not have a smartphone to dial in a phone number and book your ride. And you can book your ride on what we call subscription rides, which is where you're going to leave the house at the same time every morning and you're going to a job Monday through Friday. You can book that ride in advance, so it always pops up. And then the only reason that you would need to change it is you could change maybe one in the series if you're going to be off work on Friday, let's say, that week. Okay, so the wait and the travel times are a function of some key metrics here. The number of vehicles that you have in service and the service zone area and the average trip length. So obviously, if we had, for example, 25 cars circulating with the service, you might have a really short wait and travel time because Conway's not that big geographically speaking. It's not that wide of an area that we're covering. So these things influence your total wait and travel time. We have, so far for the service, budgeted 2 vehicles for microtransit service. And the great thing about microtransit service, too, to keep in mind is that this is flexible. This can change over time depending on how much investment the city of Conway wants to put into the service. But we're starting with 2 vehicles that will be rotating throughout the morning and the evening for a 14-hour span of service, Monday through Saturday. So we talked with the stakeholders, and we got the general feedback that 6:30 in the morning to 8:30 would be a good range of service, and would get people to some of those earlier shifts at your major employers in the industrial area, and also meet some other needs throughout the day for school, for work, for health appointments, all of those needs. And again, this service zone was determined by an assessment of the transit market by our planning firm and then working with the city staff. So I've given you each a map of the zone. For some reason, the legend just won't pull through on this PDF, but you have the legend in front of you and the zone. It's not exactly matching the Conway city borders, but it's pretty close. And the great thing about microtransit and the technology, we have the ability, if there's a point that's maybe just right past that border, but still very, very close, we could make it what's called a point of interest within the software, and so we would be able to get back and forth to that point. You don't want to go too far outside the zone because, again, that starts affecting your service deliverability, your total wait and travel times. But if it's right there on the border and it's something that somehow got overlooked during this planning process, we have the ability to tweak that a bit if needed. So the service characteristics, we did some simulations and we worked with the planning team. We came up with putting 2 vehicles in the zone throughout the day, and until we reach about 100 passenger trips per day, we're looking at an average wait time of less than 30 minutes and an average travel time of less than 20 minutes. It could be, again, that it's even less than that. It kind of depends on when you're traveling during the day, where you're going, and if you're going to go from one end of that map to the other, or if you're just going a couple blocks away, maybe 10 blocks down the street. It's dependent on a few more factors. But we should be pretty good with those. We're comfortable saying that it could be under 30 minutes wait time and under 20 minutes travel time total with 100 passenger trips per day. When we start to surpassing 100 passenger trips per day, that may require some adjustments to the service. And then if that's the case, we have a couple of ways that we can adjust that. One would be to add more cars, add more vehicles in circulation. So when you do that, you open up the availability to cut down on your wait and travel time by adding more vehicles. Or you could introduce something like distance-based pricing, which again, a lot of people are already familiar with if you've ever booked an Uber or a Lyft trip. That is distance-based pricing. The further you go, the more you pay. We're not really there yet because we haven't even launched the service, so we want to launch the service and see how that goes, but there are some ways that you can adjust that pretty easily with the technology. So starting out with this, what this means with 2 vehicles is that we'll have more than 4 drivers. So we'll have 2 in the morning, 2 in the evening, and then of course we have some backup drivers in different capacities for when those 4 drivers take sick leave or vacation leave, or just have unexpected things come up. We'll have backup. So we'll have more than 4. We'll have a supervisor and we'll have a dispatcher. And we also have, this service is also supported by the fixed costs that you see behind the scenes. So some of us have already been working on this. Obviously, the public engagement team has been working on this project. We've had numerous conversations with accounting and finance, so they've been working on this. As we hire drivers, human resources, our team at Metro will be working on that and hiring and recruiting and training people. So those are some of the fixed costs involved. The capital expenses, of course, the main obvious cost is the vehicles, but then you also have computers. This is a software as a service, situations. So you have computers, you have software, you have radios to communicate with the drivers, and then you also have signage. So we may have the need to put up a few signs here for areas where it makes sense to have a curb cut and a pull out and a nice place to park and know that you're walking out to catch your vehicle for more involved campuses where it's not so obvious where to stand. So those are the capital expenses. This is what the service vehicles will look like. These are 2021 Lone Star ProMasters 3500. This is what they look like unwrapped. I will show you here in a minute what they'll look like wrapped. But these are accessible, low-floor vehicles, and what you're looking at there is a fold-out wheelchair ramp. So these vehicles can accommodate up to 11 passengers together and can accommodate riders using wheelchairs. And there will be 2 service vehicles to start with, and they'll be owned, maintained, fueled, and insured by Metro. And this is an example of what those Lone Star ProMasters will look like. They have the Metro Connect logo on them, brought to you by the city of Conway as a tagline underneath that, and then the city's logo there on the vehicle. And then they have that kind of bright green graphic showing sort of the point-to-point map there that you get when you use public microtransit. For the fare structure, we're initially starting out at $2 per person per trip. This is subsidized, affordable, easy to remember flat fee for simplicity's sake. You'll be able to pay that fare either via cash or via the app. And this is a comparable rate to similar microtransit service in similar markets. And it also helps us manage demand. You know, the lower your fares are, the higher your demand's going to be. So there's a relationship there for sure with your fares. You want to, if we start unveiling the service and find that we have close to 300 passenger trips per day almost immediately, we're probably going to have to take another critical look at the fares. But we have points throughout this service that we will monitor and assess the fares at appropriate times so we can keep track of that. And of course, to launch the service, we have agreed to do 1 month fare free so people can get used to the service, see how it works, see if it's going to work for them and their lifestyle, and do that without having to pay the fare to get used to the service. Okay, so for the service launch and outreach timeline, we're looking at spring 2022. And that is dependent on the recruitment, hiring, and training of our drivers. We are like every employer right now out there looking to hire, so I want to just make sure that I say that this is dependent on our recruitment, but we have some job fairs coming up almost immediately after the holidays. We are being aggressive with our wages, and we are an excellent employer with great benefits. So I have confidence that we'll be able to hire some folks, and Felicia has said that she would help me spread the word when we have our recruitment flyer updated. We're tweaking the language right now and revamping that whole recruitment campaign. I already had some really great volunteers from the Conway stakeholders that we visited with last month, business owners here who have agreed to spread the word. So we'll get everybody the flyer and make sure that everybody knows and is recruiting, because it would be great to also have some drivers from the Conway community as well. And then once we have determined that service launch date, we will schedule a series of public outreach meetings where I'll be doing the same thing that I'm doing tonight and giving an overview of how the service works and pulling up the app, showing people how it works. And then we're also in that interim period working on some behind the scene things. So for example, when you have a big campus like your local universities and colleges here, they might have some specific requests from where they want us to have pull-out spots on their campus, so it's not just dropping people anywhere and in the middle of their traffic flows. So we're going to work with them to establish where do you want this pickup place and where should we set the UCA or the Hendricks or the Arkansas Baptist College pickup place for these services. And then finally, anytime, either before the launch or after, we will be available to do some rider-specific training. So that might look like what we did in Little Rock before we launched the John Bear Road Zone. So we went out to a senior center where we had a group of seniors that met monthly, and they wanted to have a specific training on this service. So we were able to do that, spend that time with them, help them download the app, help them figure out how to use the app and book the rides. And they can do that in a comfortable setting, low stakes. They can make mistakes, and we'll walk them through how to use it. So we'll be happy to do that, to train everybody on how to use this service. And that goes for any population that needs it, whether it's senior citizens, students, the general public, whatever you need. Post-launch, we will do a rider survey to see how people are liking the service, if it's up to their standards, you know, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, getting all that information from them. We'll obviously engage in regular service performance monitoring, so seeing how many miles per day that we're operating, how many passenger trips, see what the ridership is, the origin and destination, where the hot spots are. And of course, I know this is very important to the city, we will be providing you with updates for financial reporting on how much funding we're moving through as we move through this project. And again, to launch this project, it is solely through CARES Act funding, which is one-time funding from the federal government for public transit use. So this is not drawing down on your 5307 funds at all at this point. And the reason is because the city has not chosen yet to make that local match that's required in order to draw down the 5307 funds. So it's purely CARES Act funding, which is great because it's an opportunity to just try out the service and launch it with no strings attached financially, see how it works for this community, and then plan ahead if you do like it and you want to keep it long term, to determine what you're going to do with those 5307 monies, and start working maybe on a plan to phase that in over time into your city budget to be able to pay for that. So that is the presentation for the service, and I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
It's $2 for you to ride. It doesn't matter if you go from the west side of town to the east side of town. It's $2.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
$2 per person per trip.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then one other thing, if there's any elderly people with no mobile phones, how do they access the metro? I mean, how will they access a ride?
Great question. So once we launch the service, we'll have a brochure with a map and all the details, and it will have the phone number, and it will also be on our website, so where you can call that phone number and book your ride.
Okay.
And if they want to book, let's say they have a weekly appointment for, you know, a medical reason or whatnot, it's always at the same day, same time, they can go ahead and book that out in advance and always know that that's going to be booked. So it's only one call to do that.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
If this is wildly successful, which I think we all hope it is, do you ever see, is there a possibility of expanding out into the county a little bit and maybe partnering with the county? And I don't know if they have funding available or...
Sure, I think that's a definite possibility. I will say, I don't want to put anybody in the county on the spot because we have not asked the county this, but that is what happens right now in Little Rock and North Little Rock. Pulaski County is one of our 3 primary funders. So there are snippets of routes, for example, of the fixed route bus system in Little Rock and North Little Rock that actually cross into Pulaski County territory, even if it's just fractional, but that adds up when you consider it's, let's say, 50 trips per day, 359 operating days of the year, it all adds up, and so that's where that money's coming from. So yes, I think it's totally possible. And at some point, if there's interest in establishing a more regional connection between Conway and Little Rock using that, there's even this ability with microtransit software to basically create what we would call an on-demand commuter shuttle. So let's say the commuter shuttle is available only a certain couple of days a week, maybe to start, and it only happens if there's a mass of people who have booked it. And then it's, you know, then it becomes a service that's more like for maybe somebody who might be retired but wants to come to Little Rock to do some shopping once a week or whatever it is. So you could start small and you could use this technology because it's so flexible to establish that kind of connection and to see if it would grow into something else. One of the most surprising things about the service design was looking through the travel patterns and realizing that the Little Rock Conway travel pattern is actually not the strongest one. I think I had a map here if you look on this map, you see the hot pink. Those are some of the stronger travel patterns, and they're within the city itself. And so people are going to, I think there's a major shopping area where the Target is, things like that. So it's interesting how this is all coming out to play with the data. But it doesn't mean no one's traveling between Little Rock and Conway, certainly, but it may not be the strongest factor that we all thought. And this is actually probably a good news for you guys to hear as a city, because it means that people are using your city services within the city to get what they need.
Yeah, I got a question. Have a whole lot of people want to ride. How long would it take for us to get another vehicle? The reason I'm asking is we convenience driven, and people are not going to be wanting to wait an hour or so. And you're talking about getting other drivers. So I was just wondering, how long would it take for us to get another vehicle if we needed one?
Well, in a non-pre-pandemic time, I would say probably not that long. But I'm not going to say that right now because I'm living in unique times. But I would say that I don't think that'll be much of an issue. And again, we're just starting out, I know, but we have been operating several zones now at this point in Little Rock and North Little Rock. And what I would say is Conway is bigger than any one zone that we have in Little Rock, but not by much. Mm-hmm. It's still geographically pretty constrained. Mm-hmm. So I think that people will use the service, and I think that it will grow in popularity, but it may not be as rocket ship fast as we think, which hopefully it won't be. But we can make some adjustments. And again, we can revisit things like fares if we need to, and all of those things. But we do have the ability also to tap into the state procurement plan to find some vehicles that may be like what would you call it? Like a vehicle that's maybe like a step as we're waiting for a different vehicle that we might prefer, but one that's still accessible and one that's here and available now. But we have smaller vehicles, for example, in Little Rock that we use that are also wheelchair accessible. Some of them are Dodge Caravans, which are much more commonplace than the ProMasters.
Yeah, because I think it'll be a lot of elderly people would like to use the service, because I see people out with having their daughters to take them, their fathers, husbands, take them places because they can't drive. And I think this would be a plus for them. Yeah,
and one of the great things about that is that, not everybody's has the same travel needs. Mm-hmm. So, whereas someone like I might need to get to work Monday through Friday at the exact times every single time, and I would be a great subscription rider, then somebody who's retired might only need to use the service twice a week, and they're going to a health appointment one day and then the grocery store the next, and they don't necessarily have to go during peak travel time. They can wait and schedule that ride at 10 a.m. when I'm at work already, and so I'm not using the service.
The reason, and I'm going to stop dominating this, the reason why I'm asking, I'm sorry, between, I said 9 and 11, in the morning, it's a lot of elderly people out then because of less traffic and they need a ride. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them go Conway Cummins and Sam's and things, and that's what I was suggesting, because I see a lot of them out, and that might be great for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I could see that being a common use. Mm-hmm.
Do you allow pets on there? If someone was wanting to take their pet to the vet, if Aunt Sue would want to take her pet to the vet?
That is a great question. Currently, our code of conduct allows only service animals on the vehicles.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a follow-up to a statement that you made, and then a follow-up to Mary's question from earlier. How many and this is the follow-up to your statement, how many vehicles do you operate in a zone in Little Rock right now? Where we're going to have 2. If you took a corresponding size area in Little Rock, how many are operating there?
That's a great question. Pre-pandemic, it was 1 per zone, and the zones are smaller. They're not citywide in Little Rock, and one end of Little Rock to the other end of Little Rock is a lot wider, I think, geographically than Conway. So it could take you an hour to drive from one end of Little Rock to the other if you're going from, say, the airport, which is East Little Rock, all the way to the West Little Rock to the edge of the Ouachita Forest. So it's a different comparison. With the pandemic, we have doubled up and shared cars between the zones. And so it's gone pretty well. And you know, the zones in Little Rock are a little bit different. So the first zone that we started out with is in a very residential area with very low transit demand. And I would say there's a disproportionate number of people who are senior citizens and who are retired. And there's a community for people with disabilities in that area. So their travel patterns are completely different from the Riverdale zone, for example, which is full of 8 to 5ers who need to get to work in the morning and then get back to their homes in the evening. And there was a little bit of learning curve when we started the Riverdale zone for that reason, because it was characteristically different and functioning differently than the first zone. But our team learned from that, and the travel times, on average, I would say throughout all of our zones are 20 minutes or less usually. We don't make that guarantee, but it has been shorter than people expected.
A follow-up to that follow-up is,
Okay.
who's riding?
Who's riding?
Do they look like me, or do they look like some of these young people out here?
It is a cross-section of America, and that's the great thing. That's what I love about working in public transit. It's just everybody and anybody. People are riding to go to jobs. People are riding to get to healthcare appointments. But I've actually seen students, you know, like savvy tech. You know, they were born with this in their hand now. So basically, they're using it to drop the mom and dad or the grandparent taxi cab to school and get to where they need to go. So it's a little bit of combination of everyone.
Everybody. The follow-up to Mary's is, you mentioned, and Mary asked about the $2 fare. Are there any plans to offer a weekly or a monthly pass?
That's a great question, and we did talk with the city staff about that to consider it. I think that the recommendation is to see how this first year goes with the service, because microtransit is typically not so far. It's a relatively new service for all public agencies across America, and so we're all kind of learning how to operate the service. And it's not typically done right now with a monthly pass, because it is on-demand service, and it is you know, a way to help manage the demand is to set the fares. But having said that, we're going to work with our planning team, and they'll be a part, Boris and Alana, who's on this call. Alana's the finance guru and the fare guru. So we're going to be working with them to assess the service, to make sure that it's affordable, and see how people are using it. And we'll check in at the appropriate points with the city staff to talk about that. I've also asked a lot during the November stakeholder meetings by the social services representatives, the question that all social services representatives everywhere ask, which is how can we make this more affordable to the people that are depending on us and our services? And usually that means free, because they're working with people who really have limited resources. And I think the answer to that is that you have the ability as the city, if you want to invest in that, to create fare agreements, which is what we've done in Little Rock. So we have a fare agreement, for example, with the Arkansas Homeless Coalition, and a bunch of smaller shelters are members of this coalition. And through that partnership, the coalition pays us a discounted flat fee, and then they get X number of passes to hand out to all their clients. And so that's been working very well, because it covers our financial investment in it, and it helps to pay for the service, because you still have to pay your drivers, you have to pay for your fuel, you have to pay for the vehicles, but it also makes that fare free to their clients who need it.
Thank you. I'm gonna let someone ask a question.
I'm going to go on the opposite end of the spectrum from Theo. What is the age limit, like on the low end? Like, I work with juvenile court, and the number one issue is getting kids to the programs that we provide, and those are throughout the city with different providers. And even if we provide gas cards, a lot of times their cars will break down and that kind of. So I can see this being a valuable asset to us, getting these kids to the programs. So can 13-year-old kids ride these?
Great question, and the answer to the 13-year-old is yes. So currently our code of conduct, our rider code of conduct, and we can provide you guys with a link to it so you can read through it. It predates my time at Metro, and it probably needs a revisit, because the younger end of that age is pretty young, and some people are shocked to hear it, but I think it might have been originally written in the 80s or something, when we were maybe a little bit less helicopter parenting era. But the age is 6. I have not yet met a parent who has been comfortable with that. I will say that. So the age right now is 6. We've had recommendations from fellow transit agency professionals across the country to maybe consider making that 8. And what I tell all parents everywhere is it really depends on your children and their personality and their responsibility levels. I am the second oldest.
A kid under 10, so
yeah.
We're good at
well, and I'm the second oldest of 5 children, and we all have different personalities. And whereas my mother might have put me on a vehicle by myself at a young age, she definitely would have put on, I'm not going to name which sibling, but just different personalities.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
That would be great for you over there, for the juveniles, because I've seen so many of them over there not having to ride over to the program and don't have a ride.
That's our number one.
I mean, we see it all. Well, I used to see it all the time.
Right.
You know,
that's our number one issue. Is getting kids to their programs.
And they were talking about the county. Maybe the judge over there would go before.
We might could find some funding for some passes and stuff. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a godsend.
Yeah, it would be.
I really believe that.
You've kind of alluded to it. How long will this initial program last with the CARES funding that we?
Great question. So we've kind of loosely projected 4 to 5 years, so you have time to think about it. And I would recommend taking a look at it once we've launched the service and it's run for at least 6 months to a year, because anytime that you think about investing in public transit, the first question that you'd be asked probably by any taxpayer is, what am I getting out of it? How's it operating? Who's using it? How many people? Is this really worth our investment? And you won't be able to answer those questions without the data. So this is a great, unique opportunity. If there is a silver lining to a global pandemic, it is that we have this CARES Act funding, and it allows you as a city to operate the service and see how it works for you without having to put any money on the table for it. That said, you are eligible for the 5307 fund. So until you guys put up a local match, every oldest 6th year on that table will roll off and be redistributed to the other public transit agencies in Arkansas that are the recipients of the funding through the RDOT. And so those would be Texarkana, Jonesboro, Pine Bluff, and Hot Springs. And so until you put up your local match, you will be turning that away. But you can start small. You can decide that you're going to put X number of dollars in for year 1 if you wanted to build that into the 2023 budget or the 2024 budget, just to get started and get used to that. And then that way you will not have to turn back those funds and keep turning them away. You'll be increasing your investment by utilizing the federal dollars that come with that. So, with the split for the vehicles, for example, in the future, if you decide to do the local match, you're only paying 15% of the vehicle cost, and the feds are paying 85%. So it's a great investment in a way to get more value and get more bang for your buck. And with operating, it's a little bit more. Of course, the feds, want you to have some extra skin in the game for operating costs, but that would be about 50-50. Thank you.
What do you anticipate our cost to be first year of operation from City of Conway?
I don't know that we're prepared to answer that exact question tonight, but we could in the very near future, and we could definitely get that answer for you. And the only reason is because we've been going through a lot of planning services right now and working on different scenarios for different cities, and I don't want to mix up yours in my head with anybody else's. I have seen it, but I don't want to speculate. I will work with Justin, and we can get that number to you.
There is talk of establishing entertainment districts in Conway, which could necessitate moving the later evening hours to a later time period. Is that something that is flexible?
I would say as long as the city is willing to make the investment, it's possible. Now remember, if you're going to change the span of service, then you have to have the labor that goes with that. So you have to have the drivers, and they have to have their shifts, and they have to be willing to work that late. And so, you know, it becomes an extended cost and more expensive because you have to have the labor, and you have to have the vehicles still circulating out there, and you have to have the fuel. So that's what the main cost drivers are for extending it. Plus, you would have to have the dispatch team available back at home base, because they have to be able to talk to people out there on the roads and keep in contact with all of the drivers. So when you expand the service, you're really expanding all the costs that go with it. So you need to take those, you know, decisions, you know, you need to take them into consideration.
And just so I heard you correctly, we're responsible for 15% of the cost of the vehicle, is that correct, 15?
That's the usual match, is 85-15, and
Okay.
then
And we're
operating
responsible
expenses
for
50-50.
50/50 on the operational. Thank
That's
you.
correct, for 5307 funds. Again, CARES Act funding is completely 100% funded for the start of this project.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions? Becca, does any of your rest of your team have anything to say, or does that wrap it up?
I think we're excited to bring this service to Conway. We're really excited to get it
We're
launched.
Yeah,
excited.
we're
you're
excited.
coming. We're excited to have it.
Yeah, well, that was very thorough, and I appreciate it. And council, we have about 14 minutes if y'all would like to talk to any of the Rock Region team individually over there and get to know them. We'll see everyone back here at 6:30.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and Dick.
Everybody's in a good mood tonight. It must be the Christmas holiday. Good evening, everyone. We proceed each council meeting with a word of prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd like, please feel free to join us. Miss Isby, could I get you a word of prayer, please?
Gracious Father, we thank you for this city that you've blessed us with. We just, Lord, leading into the holiday season, pray for all the families, pray for everyone's coverage over the holiday, a special prayer for all of the families who have suffered losses due to the tragic weather situation. And we just thank you, Lord, for this city, and we lift this city up to you, and we just pray that everything that we do will be pleasing in your sight, and at the end that you will get the glory. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we call this meeting to order, I would like to recognize our tennis manager, Wyatt Miller. Is Wyatt here? Okay, well, he's been named the United States Tennis Association Arkansas Tennis Pro of the Year. So congratulations. And then I've asked Terry Coddington if he would come give you guys a brief rundown on some exciting news that he has and just a few things that he has going. And Terry, we're glad to see you healed up and back in the saddle, man.
Good to be here. So, thanks everybody for your time. And so the good news, for those of you that may not remember, I'm the bike and pedestrian coordinator for the city of Conway. December marks, we're kind of rounding out the first year. One of the first things that Mayor Castleberry asked me to do was work on Kinley Trail extension. And the timing was great that today we just got announced that we got a RTP grant from the state of Arkansas to help with that extension. So that's one project that I've worked on. In addition to that, there's been other multiple projects, but if you've driven down Prince Street, you've probably seen in Pompey Park where the Veterans Park will be. One day there's about 1 mile of soft surface multi-user trail that was built through a grant that was received from the Walton Foundation in order to build that trail at no cost, no match or anything involved on that. So in addition to that, volunteers cleared the land. We cleared, I think, 40 yards of debris and stuff out of there. So that was a big project. Still working on trail kiosk signage to finish that out there, and in addition to some new signage for the Cadron Settlement trails. We've updated trails out there, and so the maps are no longer accurate. So working on that. Some of the other projects you may have noticed were there's a pump track, if you're familiar with that, at Gatlin Park. It kind of looks like a BMX track of sorts. That was rebuilt in the spring also at no cost to the city. The trail builder estimated the cost between $45,000 to $50,000. So that project was completed as well. So there's volunteerism is a big part of the community and making Conway a great place to live. So the local cycling advocates have volunteered upwards of 800 hours. So if you put a dollar figure on that, that's almost $10,000 of volunteer labor that went into maintaining the trails in the community that we headed up. We also did a fundraising event, which was at Woolly Hollow State Park, but it was for the local high school mountain bike team here in Conway. So still working on, there's the Connect Conway grant that'll be submitted next year. That's a $25 million grant. I was involved in mapping out some of that proposed route in those discussions. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have for me, any other projects. You've probably noticed too, we got a recent grant for College Avenue to extend bike and pedestrian lanes, and the crossing there is kind of dangerous. So there's a grant that we received to improve College Avenue. So.
Awesome.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Jones.
I just got a question. I don't know who put those little, poles by the bike lane on Donaghy there? Are we responsible for that? Did, UCA do that?
That was part of the development of
Yeah,
that street.
That was a great
Yeah.
idea.
That's actually Finley's design there.
Yeah,
Where's Finley?
Good job, Phil.
yeah.
Way to go, Finley. That's
So,
Is Bang going out?
and,
should give UCA credit that they have agreed to sweep the bike lane because
Mhm.
our street sweeper doesn't fit
Yeah.
between the delineator and the curb. So UCA has generously
Well, that
offered to
was a
sweep
great
the lane.
idea, man.
Yeah,
Great.
Houston,
Yeah.
Houston Davis and
So-
UCA has been a great partner in that portion of it, absolutely.
and I was, you know, as a cycling advocate, you know, one of my jobs is to make Conway a great place to live and get people active. Because I believe, like, once we do that, then folks will want to live and recreate here and stay here instead of commuting to other areas. So I've also revisited the Blaney landfill, and I'm working on mapping out some trails out there. That's a long range plan, and that'll need a big grant, federal. There's ADEQ and folks involved in that. So, and the new bike lane on Donaghy's awesome. So I was a little skeptical of those barriers at first, but after riding them, you definitely feel a lot safer. So
Yeah,
I would be
yeah.
a big proponent of having more of those in the community as we work to improve roads.
But there's plenty of room for the bike, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
a very nice ride down Donaghy instead of the terrifying ride that
Yeah,
it once was.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Let's wait till we get it all paved, it's all
Yeah.
gonna be nice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that is great.
Well, Terry, you've done a great job, and,
thank you very
Yes.
much.
and even though I'd asked him about that extension to the airport, he's the guy that took the ball and ran with it. You've done quite well. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. Well, now-
Appreciate all your time.
Thank you. We'll now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, please call the roll. That's all I've been doing this holiday season.
Mr. Hawkins?
Here.
Mr. Grimes? Here. Ms. Tucker?
Here.
Ms. Mel?
Here.
Mr. Ledbetter? Here. Ms. Smith? Here. Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Isbell?
Here.
You should have received copies of the November 23rd, 2021 City Council minutes. Any corrections or changes?
Make a motion for approval as submitted.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted. There's no further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0. First up is Community Development. Mr. Hawkins, we will turn this over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item on this portion of the agenda is consideration to approve nominations for the annual boards and commissions for the city of Conway. You have been given a list of those. On the Planning Commission, the nominees are Alexander Bainey, Ethan Reed, and Greg West. For the Conway Airport Advisory Committee, Don Greenland and Jeff Standridge. For the Diversity Advisory Council, Jacqueline Galt, Meg Hawkins, Corey Parks. For the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board, John Ross Henderson, David Barber, Jeremy Chrysler. For the Historic District Commission, Emily Walters. And for the Employee Defined Benefit Pension Plan Administrative Committee, Neil Reed. And I make a motion that we accept those nominations.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve these nominations. Any further discussion or questions?
I just have a question on the Planning Commission. Does the ordinance define who makes those recommendations?
It does, I think, historically, and I think the Planning Commission does that, with the exception where someone stepped down. And if I understand that right, at that point, I get to nominate someone.
Okay, so the recommendations would come directly from the Planning Commission to us for approval.
Yes, unless someone steps down, and then I can
Okay.
make, but y'all still have to approve it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Garrett?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins?
The next item on the agenda, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating grant funds from the Federal Aviation Administration for the Conway Regional Airport, and Mr. Bell is walking forward, and I know he's gonna fill us in on this. Jack, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, sir.
This is another a CARES grant that just fell on our desk, and the mayor signed it, and we sent it back, and they sent us some money. it was a $59,000 grant. We're spending, with this ordinance, spending about 35,000 of it. We still have a little bit. I think you can spend it all the way up through 2024. But it's just, there's it's fairly broad what you can use it for. It has to be operations. And they also want you to do some sanitization and cleaning, and we've done that. We got everything sanitized, the whole terminal, and we also did some power washing and that sort of thing. So, and also put a little bit into fuel cost and maintenance and different things. So we really have been lucky to get these. We hope we get more in the future. I think Congress has appropriated a pretty good chunk of money for airports nationwide, and hoping it trickles down to little airports like us.
I make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
What's our ordinance number?
The ordinance 021-125.
Thank you.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 8-0. All right. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating insurance proceeds received from Farm Bureau for the Conway Regional Airport. Jack, it sounds like somebody missed the curve.
Somebody missed the curve. They were dodging a deer. That's pretty much the excuse everybody gives, but they did.
Hey, it happens.
Yeah, and there may have been some drag racing involved. We just don't know that. But our cameras weren't working very well that night. But this is about the 5th time I think we've had people run through various parts of our fence, and so we got lots of shiny fence around. But this was the young man was he didn't hang around, but he did leave a note. So
that was nice.
We were able to find out who it was, and we had a lot of help from the police department. They're so helpful for everything. But there was something called 360 Life or something like that. I don't know if y'all know what that is.
Life 360.
Yeah, 360. Yeah. So anyway, it tells the parents what's going on, but it also notifies the police. So it was pretty easy to track this guy down. But Farm Bureau was great to work with. I mean, we got the money before we even had to pay the bill. So that doesn't always happen. But anyway, appreciate it.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance 21-126.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to appropriate the money from Farm Bureau for insurance proceeds to the airport. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Tucker?
Aye.
Mr. Grimes? Aye. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 8-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Thanks, Jack.
Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution to approve submittal of an application to Metro Plan to apply for TAP funding for the College Avenue Side Path Project. Good evening, and
Mr.
tell us
Hawkins.
about Side Path Project.
All right. Well, it's good to be with y'all. It's always good to present a grant opportunity, but this resolution is regarding an opportunity through Metro Plan for the Transportation Alternatives Program, and they recently put out that solicitation. The project we're hoping to submit will be the College Side Path or Shared Use Path project. Now, you might have heard Terry speaking to this earlier, but we did receive funding through RDOT with this project as well. So we're going to try to leverage funds and use this Metro Plan opportunity as well to try to, expedite the development of this project and construction of the project. So hopefully we'll submit this soon and get this in the works. And the deadline for the application is early January, so that's why I'm bringing this resolution to you all tonight.
Where does it start and stop?
Salem to Ferris Road on College.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions, just let me know. If they're technical, I'm sure Mr. Vincent can, or Mr. Jones can help you guys with that.
Thank you, Rob.
All right,
Appreciate
thanks,
it.
Mr. Officer.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Council, I'll take a
I
motion.
make a motion to adopt the resolution.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution to submit for a TAP grant from Metro Plan. Any further discussion?
Further, or the resolution number, Mr. Garrett?
R 2193.
93, thank you.
Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. And council, on this next one, if you would, please look at your revised edition on this ordinance. I think you should have it before you.
I think I got it.
Mr. Hawkins, back to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Let's see, I see James walking up, and this is for an ordinance appropriating funds for the Tiny Toads project for the Public Art Board. We have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance 021-127.
And
James?
the small editorializing with the last item, I thought you all would appreciate hearing this. We've already had developers that are aware that we are applying for that grant funding, aware that that section of trail will be on the what they call the Northwest Trail within the overall regional greenway that regionally we're looking at. And so they're looking to make investments there with student housing, mixed use development. So it's already, the idea of trails is already something that is transcending from just being some type of recreational amenity to real tangible economic development. So I really hope they end up, submitting their application coming in, but they're certainly excited about that aspect of that, the prospect of that. So I just wanted to share that because I thought that was important.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
With this item on the tiny toads, you all have heard about this quite a few times. The reason that we have a revised ordinance here is we realized that we had never brought to y'all the acceptance of the RFP submissions that we had. The Public Art Board had gone through, made a selection to select Calvin Stinger, who was the artist, if you know Whimsical Toad there out by the Halter building. I call him Daddy Toad, but the Whimsical Toad. So we're utilizing the same artist for this project that we used for that project. It's the same funding as well. So this is intended to leverage some of the things that we've done in seeking grants for historic walking tours within downtown. This will be sort of an art tour with the toads having various vignettes of demonstrating sort of some type of attachment to the building where it's located. So for instance, we'll have one, they're going to be really, really small, hence the name Tiny Toads. But the idea is, for instance, in front of the Halter building, there'll be a couple teenage toads that are dancing, and because there used to be a dance floor on the third floor of the Halter building. Massey Hardware, there'll be a toad balancing a big, huge hammer, because honoring the sort of the fixture of what that used to be in the community. At the First Security Bank, there'll be a money bag toad that he's carrying all his money there to the bank. And then additionally at the Faulkner County Museum's another example. Well, there'll be a sort of a gangster toad that's locked up that he's sitting there watching the jailer, hoping that the keys fall off his chain. He can grab them so he can escape from the jail. So it's meant to be a fun way of helping convey the story of Conway, the history, so that people understand, what we were, what we have been, and sort of our overall narrative in history. So this is allocating $10,000 of the Public Art Board funding for that towards this. It's a matching grant that we've worked with the Conway Downtown Partnership. They've applied, so they have the connection through AHPP with the Main Street program to seek that funding.
Right. Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance 21-127.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance to appropriate funds for the Tiny Toads project for Public Art Board. Any further discussion? Mr. Gary.
Miss Mel?
Aye.
Miss Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes? Miss Tucker?
Yes.
Miss Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating funds for mural and graffiti protection for the Public Art Board, and we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance 021-128. And James, you're still there.
Yes, so I'm still here.
It's hard to get rid of a bad penny, dude.
Yes. So the Underground Art Walk, which is at the underpass, the Prince Street underpass, we had a lot of local artists go in there and install murals. Very shortly afterward, we had someone that decided they didn't like some of that art very much, and so they decided to face it. So as a result, we're sort of experimenting at different ways that we can protect mural installations that are public installations over time. Our chairman of the Public Art Committee sort of researched some of these materials with Mural Shield and the world's best graffiti coating. Been speaking with Spencer Clausen at Physical Plant as ways to apply these coatings. Essentially, one of it is a coating that goes on there. Once it's clean, you can pressure wash it, and then it takes the graffiti off. There's an additional coating that is sort of more of basically a peel off. So if somebody defaces it, you just go in there and peel that off, and then you can reapply it, and it just takes the graffiti off. So it's meant to be some different tools with that. So the $1,500 would be for that. If this really works pretty well in the future, and we anticipate that we'll do more of these sort of local artist mural projects in different locations where we have infrastructure where somebody might be tagging it, we would have a better sort of expression from local artists that way. And so that's really it in a nutshell.
If you would, James, meet with Chief Tapley about this too, because there's no excuse for defacing public property, especially art. As much effort and time was put into it, and as much as other people appreciate it, get with Chief Tapley and see what he can do to help there. And we catch 2 or 3 of these folks, maybe they'll figure out they probably don't want to do that in Conway.
Certainly.
All right. Back to you, council.
I make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to appropriate funds for mural, did I say that right? Mural and graffiti protection for the Public Art Board. Any further discussion?
Let me ask one question.
Mhm.
You said it could be the peel off or the application?
So there's two different materials or 2 different coatings.
So we're gonna pick one?
No, we're buying both essentially. So
Because if it can be peeled off, they'll peel it off.
yes, yeah.
That's a good point.
To deface it. They will.
That's a good point.
I'm just telling you, they will.
And it's I don't know, I don't quite know all the details of it, but it's not as it's probably not as simple as just peeling it off. I mean, it's kind of a clear coat type thing.
Gotcha.
But I assume it's probably like sunburned skin, right?
Yeah.
Huh, a little bit like that.
Okay, carry on. Sorry, I just had to ask that
Thank you,
question.
Ann. That's a good job. Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Miss Tucker?
Yes.
Miss Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Miss Smith?
Yes.
Miss Mel?
Aye.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution of support for the Public Art Board to partner with Blackbird Arts Collective for a Conway poetry project. And you still there?
Still here.
James, tell us about it.
Yes, sir. What we wanted, although this is not the formal agreement, we wanted to go ahead and bring this to you because we're working through a lot of the various details on this, and we wanted to sort of get from you all an expression of support for this project. We're working with a local partner with the Blackbird Arts Collective, which we've got some folks here, representing that group. Essentially, this is going to be intended to take poetry from local poets. We'll have sort of a contest, so it's tapping into the best and brightest minds that we have in Conway, which are I'm sure we will have some very fantastic poetry as a result of that. But taking that and then using art as a medium to help spread that in various locations like schools. Some of the things that we've talked about are using some of these installations in areas around schools to help with pedestrian safety. So it's not only exposing kids to some culture, but also at the same time using that as kind of a tool to help keep them safe. So it does more than just one thing with that. So we'll have some more details as we hammer out a formal agreement, but essentially they'll be seeking for about $5,000 with that. So we wanted to go ahead and let you know that that's going to be coming, so that when you see that later, you'll know what it is.
I make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution of support for the Public Art Board to partner with Blackbird Arts Collective for a Conway Poetry Project. Any further discussion? Mr. Carrot.
This will be Resolution R2194. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Final item here, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance amending existing restrictions on the use of motorized vehicles on city bike lanes and pedestrian pathways for the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board. And we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance O21-129.
Make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0, and I see Mr. Vinson stepping up.
Yes, sir. I'm not sure if this is 100% an engineering matter, but I just wanted one last chance at the podium.
Really?
We really wanted you here, too.
I'm happy to be here, sir. There are at least one member of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board here, as well as the police chief is here. A lot of people, the city attorney as well, has had input on this. I think this began actually at the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board, mostly regarding a discussion about Davis Street. I could be wrong, but I think that might be the only, if it's not the only, it is probably the most prominent bike lane in town where we have a problem with people parking in the bike lane, and we don't have it signed that parking is prohibited. So that began a discussion amongst the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board. The board voted in approval of the ordinance that you see before you, with one exception that's a minor exception with respect to the 15 mile per hour speed limit that applies on shared use paths. They did not vote on that specifically. That was a recommendation that I made to include. That was included by somebody else, I believe, but they just did not vote specifically on that minor issue. You may have a lot of questions. I have a lot I could say, but that is the essence of it. There is an existing ordinance, I will add, that is a little bit vague. I believe the language is that a motor vehicle cannot be either operated on a, I can't remember the language now, I should have looked it up, on a, I think it says on a pathway, a bicycle pathway or something kind of vague like that. So it was a little bit vague in the sense that it doesn't specify that it's a bike lane or a shared use path. It's also vague. There was also some discussion about the fact that the word operated is a little vague because it doesn't clarify that a car can't park and not be operated in said bike lane. So there you have it.
So we're gonna get some signs that do not park in the bike lane, correct?
Well, so that, I think that does, one of the things that I discussed with the police chief is that, so currently the police department in Conway does not enforce parking in bike lanes unless they have a sign to support it, to support ticketing the vehicle that's parked in a bike lane. I think it's probably very likely that even if the council passed this ordinance, the officers would still probably not feel comfortable ticketing a vehicle parked in a bike lane unless there is signs stating that it's illegal to park in the bike lane.
I think it would be a deterrent whether or not the tickets are given out or not to have the sign up there, because I'm sure it's a lot of people that doesn't know they're not supposed to be there. There's some that don't care, but it's a lot of them that don't know. So
sure,
I think it would be nice if we had some signs up.
Yes, certainly. I think, like I said, there are a lot of places in town where we had people parking in bike lanes, and we've added signage specifying that that there's no parking allowed in the bike lane. Davis Street is the only place where I haven't done that because there's a lot of parking on Davis Street. It's very residential in nature, and there's a lot of cars that park on the street in some places because they don't have anywhere else to park. And now there was a lot of discussion about, well, they certainly could park on a side street that's not marked with bike lanes, which is true. And then the discussion went for weeks. Honestly, it dove into social justice matters, and we got pretty into the weeds. Honestly,
but the bike lane is
Go ahead.
it's just going to be on one side of the street, isn't it?
It's on both sides.
It's on both sides?
Yes, Davis is currently striped with bike lanes on both sides of the street. Now, this doesn't mean that we couldn't change that. One of the things that I have considered is, of course, one option would be that the council could pass this and yet decide that we don't want to enforce no parking on Davis Street. Now, the way those two things could coexist would be that we could eliminate the bicycle emblem in the bike lane on Davis Street, which would technically make it a shoulder rather than a bike lane, which would mean it's not illegal to park there. Just throwing that out as an option that I have considered.
But the only reason I'm asking, it's a lot of, like you said, it's a lot of residential area on Davis.
Sure.
Is it not any way that we could compromise and just have one bike lane so that people could park their cars on the other side of the street rather than around the corner?
So yes, you could do that. The problem with that is that if you move you could do one of two things. You could move the bike lanes all to one side of the street, but it needs to be double the width in order to accommodate two-way traffic. So it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. Then the road is still not really wide enough to accommodate all of those lanes. Of course, another thing that was discussed is just making the bike lane one way, so somebody could go northbound in a bike lane, but southbound they're not in a bike lane anymore. But then it might kind of get confusing to both the drivers and the cyclists.
And another option would be to remove the bike lane off Davis.
Yes, you certainly could. My recommendation, since it's newly striped with thermoplastic, would be not to remove the bike lane per se, but to remove the bike lane symbol, which makes it not technically a bike lane anymore, but just a shoulder that could be used for parking or for cyclists.
Because I've kind of been involved in this conversation with some members of BPAB and expressed that very concern that you brought up.
Mm-hmm.
These are people's homes. Mm-hmm. They have enough of a driveway for one car. Mm-hmm. They have visitors. And you're asking them to park around where?
Yeah,
there's that big block of Davis.
I agree with that.
Yeah, these days you don't want to park your car out of
your
sight.
Yeah, you're not going to.
No.
And so I've expressed, if you can imagine, there's been some heated arguments in my home about this very topic.
Do I need to write you a note too?
You need to write me a note. Yeah. And Davis Street was the one I thought of, and I don't know if there's any others.
Of course, there are potential others. Davis is not the only street in town.
Because I noticed on Caldwell, that block that's just east of Center Street.
Yeah, so Caldwell honestly is an example of a road where I think it actually does warrant no parking. It's a busier street.
Right.
We've had some discussions about one intersection in particular, but there are more than one intersections where there are sight distance issues on Caldwell, and we have already made the determination that adding no parking signs to Caldwell is probably warranted. We haven't done it yet, only because the way that the council decides to vote on this may affect the wording on the sign. But I think we probably will want to prohibit parking on Caldwell. Center Street is an example of a road that is technically wide enough for bike lanes. If it got repaved, then we would probably restripe it. If we restripe it, we might add bike lanes. And so this would be another example of a street like Davis where we would then look at it differently if this was passed. We would probably either not paint the bike lanes at all, or if we did paint them, we wouldn't add the bike lane emblem, which is a whole different argument that we'll probably have with the BPAB and amongst ourselves, but it's still, that's...
Is there any way to do an exception that would be perhaps just the historic district? Because I think that's where most of these situations exist?
James? You wanna weigh in on that? Were you listening?
Yes, I was listening. The Historic District Commission really, I would say, if you're saying refer that to them.
No, I'm saying
Oh.
use that geographic definition of the historic district
Oh, yeah, I mean,
to be part of the exception to this.
it's certainly possible.
Yes,
I don't-
because
That's
people
where most
live
of-
there, and I can't see saying you can't park in front of your own house.
Okay.
Well, and the first thing I thought of when this came up was, it's been several years, but this came up quite frequently about parking in yards. A lot of people didn't like parking in yards. We never pulled the trigger to ban it, but this would force cars into yards and probably make a different problem in that area.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So I guess I was just trying to identify, is there a geographic region that's known and easily identified where we could, to Finley's point, you might stripe it but not put the bike symbol in it. So if it's there, you can use it, and if it's not, but people can still park there. Or we just don't put up the no parking signs in the historic district. Yeah.
Basically be a fog lane, right?
Yes, exactly. This is a stifling problem, but I would say that if we, what I said about Davis Street is largely because we've already marked it, and grinding out or blacking out a symbol is not that difficult. Taking out a mile of bike lane is a little bit different. Requires a lot of grinding, and it's just ugly. If the council decided to vote on this, my recommendation would probably be in the future in areas like this, we probably just don't put bike lanes in, either the line or the symbol.
I can think of RB Drive through St. John's. There's cars all the time parked. There's bikes coming all the time. It's a really busy thoroughfare through there too. So cut through. So I know that's another example of a neighborhood. You don't have enough parking probably in the driveways, and so they're parking in the street a lot of the time. And
See, Davis over there is close to the colleges too, and so you got a lot of more than one person staying in an apartment, I'm sure.
There's
And
a lot of rental houses.
Yeah, and everybody's got a car now.
I think at some point, I apologize. I think at some point, the decision kind of needs to be stuck with as best we can. If we don't want people, I understand the historic district. And I think that's relevant, but there's going to be upset people either way. If people park in bike lanes, then we've got upset cyclists. If we don't allow it, then we're going to have people that have got to walk farther. There's always places to park, and that's kind of where the discussion went on Davis Street. There's side streets that you can park on, but people are going to have to walk further. Maybe carrying groceries, maybe carrying a baby, and so those are the sorts of things that we're discussing.
I don't know if it's just the walk. It might be the parking your car around the corner from your house and leaving it. I don't know if people are gonna be.
Valid
I
point.
wouldn't be. Up
Yeah,
there.
valid point.
It's gonna end up being in front of somebody's house,
Yeah.
and those people are gonna be suspicious of whose car it is and not really want it there, so.
And the counter to that would be, there's other places to ride your bike as well.
Yeah.
I wonder how many bicycle are kids going to school? I don't know what the numbers are. Are these just recreational bicycles, or are they kids trying to get to school, or?
The VPAB might have numbers on that. I can say as a traffic engineer, generally kids going to school ride on the sidewalk. They don't ride in bike lanes.
And that was my other question. Aren't there sidewalks along both sides of
There are sidewalks on at least one side of Davis for the majority of it.
Are they in
They're
good
not
shape?
100% consistent.
Yeah, they're new.
Oh, I'm sure there's tree roots coming up a whole lot.
We've done a lot of work on the sidewalks on Davis Street.
Yeah.
But I can't promise you that I think they might be consistent on one side. I wasn't prepared for that question. I'm sorry.
I think you're right.
Okay.
So do you think that taking the symbols off Davis in the bike lane is enough? And then not putting signs up there?
I think the advantage of taking the symbols off is that the problem with you've probably I'm channeling your husband at this point. What a cyclist is going to say, this type of cyclist that is going to use a bike lane is going to say, well, if I'm going to bike on that street and there's a bike lane and I have to weave in and out of traffic because I'm going around cars, that's dangerous for me as a cyclist. But if there's a bike lane that's painted as a bike lane, even if it's not painted, honestly, but I don't want to have to wave in and out. So what I want to do, the safest thing, and is right. They're right. The safest thing might be to just not be in the bike lane and stay in the lane. But if they do that, then they run the risk of cars getting angry at them because they're not over there in the bike lane. And I bet Terry has got. Well, he's not. I'm sorry, I just called him out. He's not here. I bet Terry's got stories. AJ may have stories of people buzzing him because they're not in the bike lane and want to get the heck over in the bike lane.
Yeah, you get buzzed no matter what.
Yeah, true.
And Davis is not, and I ride that way a lot, and it's not really a high traffic because it is so wide. I purposefully have always picked Davis or Center because over Donaghy.
Right.
So now I have to try Donaghy because I just feel safer riding that way.
Sure.
If AJ's over there, does he want to say anything? Or
I've been dying to say something.
So, in all fairness, because he and I have had email exchanges too.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that I've kind of thought of while I was sitting here, I think I like the idea of removing, for the short term, removing the symbols from Davis Street. And I think as an overall picture, the idea here is to kind of direct future development and how we treat the roads with the idea that we're just trying to accommodate cyclists, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a bike lane. So there's other options. So on Davis, for example, if traffic's slow enough, the idea with a bike lane is that, you have bicyclists that are moving slower than vehicles, but if traffic is slow enough, then there's not an issue with bikes in a normal traffic lane. So the issue, I think, that we're trying to address is cyclists who think or feel that they need to be in a bike lane trying to dodge vehicles that are parked in bike lanes. So whether removing the bike lane is the best option or prohibiting parking, I think is going to be location dependent. And the discussions on the board were typically, let's look at each of these cases specifically. So I guess that's kind of my biggest input here was the idea to design infrastructure appropriately based on whatever the case should be in that location.
So from an enforcement perspective, having BPAB have input in where the signage would go up, the no parking because it's a bike lane, that's where you all could give good advice as to where it's really needed. And to your point, and I think you raised a really good point, future development, that's thought of as part of any future expansion or development. And exactly. So I feel a little more comfortable because then you guys can look at Davis and say, okay, probably the best option there because there are a lot of smaller homes with no driveways and plus it's a wide street and people even like me feel safe riding on it. Is a bike lane necessary there to protect the rider or encourage people to ride there?
Right.
So would something like that work, Finley?
I think, I'm sorry, I was talking to the chief during
That's
some of
okay.
that conversation, but I think that I support what I heard you and AJ say, which is that the one point of this is to direct future development. In retrospect, so I have sometimes been guilty of really striving for good pavement utilization, which means and I mean I kind of learned this from Ronnie. We wanted to be a bicycle friendly city, so if the pavement was wide enough to add bike lanes, we added bike lanes. and maybe have been guilty of not asking ourselves, is this a good place for a bike lane? And we've added them potentially in places where they shouldn't be. I don't think there are very many examples of that, but Davis is certainly one of them. And so this would be, you know, some guidance for the future to ask that question rather than just indiscriminately putting in bike lanes.
So is there a way, and I guess I turn to look at Charles, to incorporate it into the ordinance that it's enforced where the signage is up only?
Well, if you look at the current ordinance, in particular 81207 in the parking section, that's essentially what it says, is
Okay.
where official signs prohibit parking. And I think that would be the example of Robinson.
Okay.
So that's the current status. You gotta have, even though you've got a marked bike lane, as I understand it, the ordinance requires a sign.
It wouldn't automatically?
Correct.
Okay.
This ordinance would make it automatic.
Okay.
Without signs.
So.
However, I think that probably the transportation department could easily work together with the police department to determine, you know, I mean, I know the police chief well enough that if he's in an area where he's writing a whole bunch of parking tickets, you know, he's probably going to call me and say, you know, do I need to keep writing these tickets? Or, you know, now that he's here and he's heard this conversation, he probably would call Kurt and say, maybe this is a place where we want to take out these bike symbols and just make it a fog lane.
There's a sign on Country Club that says something to the effect of bikes travel the entire lane, something like that.
Yes, so you
got that
probably
from a
remember seeing pavement markers and signs that were called sharrows, that were a picture of a bicycle with like two big chevrons above it or below it. I can't remember if they're above or below it. And that's called a sharrow, which is it indicates that the car is supposed to share the road with the bike. And those were really popular, you know, around the time I started here as a traffic engineer around 12 years ago. They were really popular, and they weren't a great idea, because the idea behind it was that it was a wider than normal lane, and the bicycle would kind of hug the edge, and then the car would go around them, and it has led to some really dangerous situations where cars are passing bikes too close and where they shouldn't be passing bikes. And so in recent years, the predominant thinking has been that, you know, seemed like a great idea at the time, but it's not a good idea anymore. We've taken a lot of those out in favor of the bikes may use full lane signage to indicate that this lane is not wide enough for a bike to travel parallel with a car. And so if the bike's in the lane, it's his lane. And if you want to go around him, you got to go around him, you know, the way you'd pass a car. You're going to have to take the other lane.
I think part of the problem with that is people don't understand that law. And not that some of them would obey the law, but a lot of people don't understand the reason behind that law, that they're supposed to pass them just like they would a car. Because a lot of people, and I'm not saying that I know some of these people, they just want to zip right by you because they figure this is my lane. I'm just saying. I've seen it.
You want to talk?
Yeah. Bike lane enforcement, Spencer Clausen, code enforcement, viewers at home. It's very difficult to enforce this. Anytime you have a bike lane, talking with Chief Tapley, if you're not allowed to park in the bike lane, are you allowed to park in the street? And then it looks like you're in the middle of the road. The way code enforcement handles it is typically we use our discretion. The section of Caldwell that you're talking about has 2 bike lanes right there, and it also has 2 sidewalks.
They're parking on the sidewalk.
They're parking on the sidewalks, yeah. But if they park off the sidewalk into the street, when you're trying to turn east off of Clifton, or Center, you can't see them. You can't see through there, and it makes it more dangerous. So that's one that we decide no action is necessary. Anyway, I just wanted to say that typically we get calls on parking the bike lane a lot. We get complaints. One suggestion would be we can't give the parking tickets. What we can do is we sticker the vehicle, and if it's still there in 24 hours, we can tow it, depending on a few things, but a lot of times it could be up to 30 days. That's not going to satisfy someone riding their bike. So, you know, maybe if we have a third option of a friendly sticker or something that says, please don't park in the bike lane, but it has no teeth, it might kind of wake somebody up to it, and they could be considerate of that. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of speak on the enforcement side of this issue. So.
Thank you, Spencer.
Council, back to you.
So I guess I go back to, is there a way to modify what's been presented so that there is some discretion? Or that it's only enforced when there is signage present?
I think we need to, I'm sorry, we getting ready to talk? I just think, before we do this, we need to get some input from the people that live in these areas, that has rent property in these areas that are renting, and how is this gonna affect them? If we got 4 or 5 cars out there, can't park in the bike lane, how is that gonna affect their business? Are there? Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
We can take a little bit more time if y'all choose to and table this.
Let's table this and let's put a little more thought into it. What's the solution? What's the solution?
I'd say leave the bike lane if you remove the bike center. That would be my idea.
And that's what I'm saying, but I mean, at that point, it
Right.
doesn't become a bike lane.
Yeah, that's
It
true.
becomes a
I
parking
mean,
lane.
there's
if
a
you
little
remove
spot
the
there
bikes.
that bicycles can use,
Yeah.
but it's not enforceable.
And I bike frequently, and I don't pay any attention to the cars in the bike lane. I just swerve out and go on my
Or
merry
if
way.
there's a lot of people parked, I just ride.
I do
on the
too.
outside.
I go down the bike lane. If I see a car parked there, I just get on and go around. It's not that big a deal to me. Of course, I'm just one person, and I'm not a competition rider by any means.
Yeah. I think that what David's talking about
Yeah.
actually, and allows for that advice and input, which we need from VPAD. That's
Right.
why they're there, to give us that advice. So, kind of charge them to look at, especially in Old Conway, where do we need to remove the bike lane symbols? I don't need to undo it. And to your point, make sure as we move ahead that we're a little more thoughtful about where bike lanes go.
And I will say that I would like to credit the BPAP for being very concerned about, one might think that because they're the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board, they may be more concerned about, protecting the cyclists than the rights of people to park on the street. But they were very concerned about this issue and about taking away people's places to park.
Sure.
Well, I agree with David.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
remove
I think
the
if we
bike.
can do that,
Remove the bike.
Okay.
do we have a
problem.
motion to approve?
We've had a motion to waive 3 readings.
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this ordinance. Any further discussion? Hope you're happy, Finley. You started this, now you're leaving.
That's why he came tonight.
We wanted to get our money's worth.
Last little jab in before you leave. Okay.
Well,
Mr. Garrett.
The ordinance 021-129, Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes, Mr. Ledbetter,
Yes.
Ms. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Ms. Isby.
Yes.
Passes 8-0. Is this your last, do you have anything else on the agenda tonight, Finley?
no, sir.
Well, this is Mr. Finley's last council meeting. And I know you're not gonna believe this, Finley, but I really am gonna miss you.
Oh, I believe it. I'll miss you too. And I would stick around, but my son left his history book in my truck, and he's got test tomorrow. So
Just don't help him with it, okay?
Well, there's actually 2 of them, but we'll introduce one tonight. Kurt Jones will be taking Finley's place, specifically in the engineering department, and then Jacob Reynolds will be our man on the street. So they've split their duties.
I'm sure Finley's warned you about me, so, but it's not as bad as he says, okay?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Anyway, Finley, we wish you well, and
Thank you. I
you've
appreciate
done an
it.
outstanding job for the city of Conway.
Mr. Vincent.
Good luck, man.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
But
Thank you.
before you leave, I'd like to say something. I don't know whether you knew what a roundabout was 12 or 14 years ago or whenever you started, but I'm going to tell you this right now. You are the premier roundabout designer in my mind in the state of Arkansas.
Well, I really appreciate that. I appreciate it very much.
You
Thank
are.
you.
And you're who my daughter talks about from Texarkana. She said, coming up here, she hates it because it's just like getting on a merry-go-round. She don't know when to jump in.
Thanks, Finley.
there are ones that jump out, but dude, for the most part, they've really set us apart from other communities.
Good luck, man.
We've done together.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Finley. Mr. Hawkins, these other two items are on yours. They're you.
Well, I saw this, and I thought that this first one particularly looked like it ought to be.
Yeah, both of those
something
are
that
you.
we did. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and finish these up then. We have a resolution, this is item B1, have a resolution requesting the Faulkner County Tax Collector place liens against properties because of expenses incurred by the city. The address of the property is 1259 Harrison Street. Is there an owner or representative of an owner from 1259 Harrison Street with us this evening? Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone, so we have a resolution to read for this item. It's Resolution R2195.
Make a motion for adoption of the resolution. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution requesting that the Faulkner County Tax Collector place a lien against property located at 1259 Harrison, in the amount of $209.54.
Does look like that.
Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. And finally, Mr. Hawkins, your last item.
Next, my final item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution to condemn the structure at 1845 Teresa Drive for the physical plant and code enforcement. And Spence, what you got?
Well, this property at 1845 Teresa Drive, it was a victim of a structure fire in November of 2020. Since then, we've kind of kept an eye on it, had several complaints about it, but there was insurance involved and some legal issues, and sometimes we kind of pump the brakes and see what happens. Well, eventually it became clear that nobody's moving fast on it, and the house poses a great risk of public health and safety. I know y'all have seen the pictures. It's barely a house. There's also a swimming pool in the back that no fence around it, anything to protect it from, a child or somebody walking back there. But we just ask for y'all to condemn it. That'll give us some time to start gathering bids. And if the property owner is not able to get it taken down in 30 days, I'd like to move forward with that.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution to condemn the structure located at 1845 Teresa Drive for code enforcement.
This is Resolution 96, Mr. Mayor.
Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Thank you, Spencer.
Yes, sir. And that was R2196.
96, yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, next
Thank y'all
up,
very much.
we have our Public Safety Committee, and we have Chief Tapley here who wants to consider the approval to dispose of unused assets for the Conway Police Department. Oh, Chief.
Good evening. This first one is we have received reimbursements from various entities for extra duty services, insurance proceeds, and task force funds, and we're just asking them to accept those funds.
I make a motion to waive 3 readings. Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
Make a motion for adoption of the ordinance. Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to appropriate reimbursement funds for the Conway Police Department. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
It's the ordinance O21-130. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
All right, it passes 8-0. And we have Chief Tapley again, consideration to approve disposal of unused assets for the Conway Police Department.
Yes, we have a seized vehicle that we would like to dispose of through public auction, and we're asking for your permission to do that.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the disposal of an unused asset for the Conway Police Department. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief.
Next section is the, on the agenda is for personnel issue for the adopting the amended employee handbook, and Ms. Mabry Williams. How are you?
Good evening, thank you. City Attorney Charles Finkenbinder and I have been working on this for many, many months, on and off most of 2021. A lot of this is just correcting language to comply with federal and state law. We've added some sections, purpose, scope, definitions. We clarified the drug-free workplace policy to clarify who is in a security, safety-sensitive position with medical marijuana. We updated travel policy, purchasing policy, We updated our maternity leave. We added a section for nursing mothers. We added a section for genetic information. We revised the retirement and pension plans to include the new employees' pension plan that was adopted in May of 2018. Added a section on handling requests for information under FOIA. Added a section for how to handle requests from the media. The inclement weather section was clarified. I'm not going to go through every single one, but it was mainly a cleanup.
Make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
Go on. Sure.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance, including the emergency clause.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause to amend the employee handbook. Any further discussion or questions for Ms. Mabel Williams? Yes, sir.
I got one for Mr. Finkenbinder. You're good with the changes that are made, Mr. Finkenbinder?
Yes, most of the changes came from the municipal league sample, the model personnel handbook, or from federal law. One of the policies that I think Lisa had suggested updating, and I thought it was overdue, was on our information technology policies. It gives employees more guidance and more clear guidance on like password maintenance, password sharing, internet security, computer security, and I thought Lisa's suggestion on that was extremely timely, and we were a little bit behind some of the other cities. So.
Good. Good. Council's good, I'm good.
Mr. Garrett.
The ordinance 021-131. Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
And the emergency clause, Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Those both pass 8-0. Thank you, Lisa. Good
Thank
job.
you.
Okay, next we have a finance and its ordinance to adopt the budget for the city of Conway for fiscal year 2022. I'll just give y'all a few brief highlights here. As per state law, we sent out the 2022 budget on December 1st. We budgeted flat or slightly under for 2022. We received $24.5 million in sales tax in 2021, and we budgeted $24 million in sales tax for 2022. In 2021, our general fund budget was $34.8 million. Our 2022 budget will be $38.5 million. If y'all approve it, this leaves us with a surplus of about $70,000. As always, historically, I've held back on expenses the first quarter of every budget year. Ask department heads to hold back so we can get a really good feel as to how the sales tax monies will go in that year. We currently have $10.7 million in reserves. $1.7 million of that is the CARES Act money, which we'll be using for a fire station. That will leave us $9 million in reserves. We again put $250,000 back into a separate reserve account to pay back on the $1 million settlement. We still have 2 years remaining on that. Good news is there was no increase for insurance in 2022. This also includes a 4% across the board COLA raise for all personnel, including all elected officials. That's kind of the high points and the highlights. Mr. Winningham will step up to the podium here. And if you have any questions, he will answer them.
Like he's ready to run
All right, Mayor, when will the COLA rates take effect?
Pardon me?
January 1st?
January 1.
Okay, thank you.
And I would like to thank Mr. Winningham and his staff. They did a great job. Spent a lot of time on this, and as bad as I hate to say it, Tyler, you're doing a great job. Tyler's got a great sense of humor. But anyway, Tyler, if you would come up, in case the council does have any questions for you.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate you saying that because you and I talked about the sales tax because it is a lot higher than, and last year could have been an anomaly, but with that reassurance that we're all going to look at monitoring expenses, and that coming in, because
What is this?
to project a $3.5 million increase
Yeah.
over last year's budget is a lot, and it's good news, and it's good news.
And
So-
we were able to add a lot of things in that we've been holding back in the past, especially capital equipment.
Well, and our employees.
Our
Yeah.
employees have
Yeah.
stuck with us and done a tremendous job. And of course, the department heads always show up January 2nd, we'll spend money, and always say, not the first quarter. So.
Yeah, Miss Mel, you know, that's it. The sales tax trend is really something you see across the state. If that were not the case, we would not budget what we did. We would, you know, if it was more of an individual basis, like, ooh, Conway just blew up in sales tax, what's going on? We'd wait and see how that shook out. But since it's virtually every metropolitan area and metropolitan city in the state of Arkansas is experiencing these sales tax increases, I feel comfortable.
Yeah.
putting
Well,
it
and
where
like
we are.
I was thinking, it's a lot of the money we got during COVID, all of us got, and
Right.
we're spending it. And you know, was that the impact, or was it because now we've had more of a full year of internet sales tax, and so it could be a number of issues affecting
Right.
it. But the mayor was really very assuring, and I know we'll watch it.
Who was?
The mayor, our mayor.
And I'm so
Really?
thankful to see that we're investing in our employees as well by the COLA
absolutely.
raise. I mean, that's a huge
Yeah,
thing.
that's huge.
Yeah, since we just did the one-time bonus in 2021 equal to what a COLA would be, now actually doing a 4% COLA that's gonna carry on with those employees, hopefully kind of makes up for that we're conservative with this year, because we still were very unsure about the implications of COVID.
And with no increase in health insurance and things, it's a real raise.
Right.
You know, because some years we've done it and
Yeah.
it nets out.
it
Yeah.
does, yeah, it does.
It's barely keeping ahead of it.
As a county employee, listening to the forum court argue over every single dime that they're trying to give employees, let me just say, I appreciate the city and what they've done.
I think I saw you on the meeting the other
Yeah,
night.
you
there.
might have. I was
think
trying to
did.
keep my mouth shut.
How'd you do with that?
I did pretty good. I finally had to get up and leave.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Winningham, if I could.
Sure.
I would be remiss if I did not at least bring this up. Everybody is up across the state. I do not question that whatsoever. But I do know that some of this, maybe as much as $1,500,000, was due to two situations that involved money from the federal government that ended up in people's pockets this past year. There were stimulus checks that were distributed on two different occasions, I think, and I don't know the exact number of those checks or the dollar figure. I've got a $1,200 figure in my mind. If they were bigger than that, then my numbers that I've got are wrong. But I took 20,000. I just took a number of 20,000 people in Conway out of 70,000 receiving a $1,200 check. Okay, 2 times, and that is. Let me check my numbers. If you receive that one time, that's a total of $24 million. If you receive, and when the second one went out, that's $48 million of additional revenue that was available to be spent in the city, of which we collect sales tax figures. The second item is child tax credits, which were available to people if you had a child under the age of 6. You got $300 a month. If you had a child over 6, you got $250 a month. Again, taking the figure of 20,000 people, that's $14,000 a month, which is another $3.5 million. I'm sorry, it's $3.5 million a month if you had 14,000 children, and that's what the Conway Public School System says that we have under the age of 18. Not the Conway Public School System, but the Census Bureau says that we have 14,000 people under the age of 18 in our city. You take those numbers, multiply those out, and that's $21 million. When you add that to the $48 million, that gives us almost $70 million of new disposable income that ended up, a lot of it probably ended up in stores and on Amazon or wherever else money was spent. A lot of that came back to us in sales tax revenue. I am just concerned that if that money doesn't show up again, that we might have over budgeted our sales tax revenue figure. That's the only thing I want to say about that, and make sure that everybody is aware of that particular situation. $70 million. When you take our sales tax rate of 2.125%, that's $1,275,000. We could be over budget. That's all I wanted to say.
And I understand what you're saying, Mr. Hawk. That's one thing that Ms. Mel brought to my attention. Tyler and I had lengthy conversations over that. With COVID and everything we've had, it's been hard to really get a solid grip on anything. We really don't know what the city gets as far as sales tax. You know, we never have been able to pin that, but I think that's a big part of it. But as I said, for the first quarter, we're going to hold tight.
Yeah.
And that should make up that. And if it looks like it's going south, y'all will be the first to know.
Well, what I'm saying is we need to have a contingent plan just in case, because it could show up that our sales tax revenue is going to be between $20 and $22 million, which is what I anticipate. Now, having said that, Mr. Winningham and I sat in his office over there when COVID hit, and I told him, I said, we're going to be off 25% this year. And he said, yeah, we are, and we weren't. Were we?
No, sir.
No. So, no. I mean, it went good.
Right.
But we just need to know that it's out there. That possibility is out there, because there's $70 million of money that might not be generating sales tax revenue.
That's true. And again, we don't want to use it. We've got $9 million in reserves. We took in a lot of things in consideration too. Just the amount of homes that are being built in Conway.
Oh.
Things are,
Yeah.
Mr. McCullum is sitting out there now. He can tell you right now, they're having a hard time keeping up with inspections. There's a lot of things happening in Conway, and you know, that bubble could break at any time too, pop at any time too, the housing market. But right now, we're looking good. But I promise you, we had those conversations, and we'll hit the brakes hard and fast if we have to.
Okay.
Let me just get on this like that. As Yogi Berra said, it's time to make predictions, especially about the future. I move we adjourn.
We got a couple more things.
Oh, yeah. I got off in a rabbit hole. I thought we were done.
That's not a rabbit hole, Bard.
We need a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. We've already waived. Okay, I need a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. Okay, I have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance with the emergency clause.
With the emergency clause, second.
All right. Mr. Garrett.
This be ordinance 021-132. Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes? Aye. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
And the emergency clause, Ms. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Those both pass 8-0. In council, we've got just a couple of quick things. I would like to ask that you suspend the rules so we could add one item regarding the selling of additional property.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second that we suspend the rules. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Walden.
Yes, so y'all may be familiar, Mr. Connolly that lives back by where we're Blaney Hill. Last year we sold a strip of land where his ancestral home was, or his folks' ancestral home was, and he's been working on constructing his house there. And there's some topographic challenges that he's ran into, and he needs to purchase about an additional, I think about 1,400 square feet from us to kind of square off the property for a retaining wall for him. And so that additional item before you is to allow us to sell property for that purpose. He said he would cover all the closing costs and whatnot, and it would more than cover the cost of what he's proposing would more than cover what the appraised cost of the property is. So it's a very small piece of land, but we wanted to go ahead and do that and accommodate him. So
I make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Any further discussion?
Down a .45.
It's zero, it's .045.
Okay, I just saw you, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good. Just checking, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, you didn't get one.
It's wrong with the original. Yeah.
Okay. No other discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Well, right, in
Oh, I'm sorry.
as it is, but down here it's not in section 1.
Yeah.
But the first part, it says 4.5 acres.
That's what the original piece was.
Oh, and then he needed the extra point for.
Gotcha. Yes.
Yeah, it's related, that's related to the original sale. It's an additional .045.
Sounds good.
I guess it's read this.
Thank you, Felicia.
Look and make sure.
Thank you.
That it's worded right, I don't know.
Mr. Garrett?
It's be resolution R2197. All in favor, say aye.
And he needed
All opposed.
He need another.
Passes 8-0. And the last thing we have is consideration to cancel the December 28th, 2021 City Council meeting. That's entirely up to the council. I think you're all aware that we will ask for a special meeting on the 27th. So if we have any other business that y'all want to conduct on that date, we can, but it looks like we'll have to convene on the 27th very briefly for really a really great reason. And I think you'll hear more about that this Thursday.
Can we do that Thursday, maybe after the announcement? Do that meeting?
No,
At that point?
no, we cannot.
Oh, we can't?
No.
Okay.
No, and I haven't talked to Gordon Welborn about that, but I
Okay,
think we'll have to
that's
wait.
fine. I just thought, while we're all gonna be there.
Are y'all good with canceling the 28th though?
I kinda wanted to be there.
Well, just come on down here.
Everybody looked at, why is everybody laughing? I'll be with you.
I'll take a motion to that.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second to cancel the December 28th, 2021 City Council meeting. Mr. Garrett, if there's no further discussion,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
passes 8-0. Council, I've enjoyed working with you again another year. Merry Christmas to all of you, and God bless all of you, and same to you folks out there. This is a tremendous, tremendous city to be a part of, and there's a lot of great things going on here and a lot of great people. So Merry Christmas and God bless you all. Oh, we're adjourned.